as you can see, I am parked in a beautiful location. This is the ideal place for some photography. In all seriousness though, I really love this tree. It's always captured my imagination, and I've always thought how cool it would be to get a shot of this tree with an awesome sky behind it. And that's why I'm here this morning. I was hoping to get a beautiful sunrise, beautiful clouds, all of that good stuff, but instead, all I seem to have got is a lot of morning traffic. So what I'm hoping is that in some way I can turn what is a pretty ugly location into quite a pretty photo. But at the moment, I don't really know how I'm going to do that.
I walked up and down, I worked the angles, but I just wasn't happy with the results. And I was just about to give up and walk back to the car when I had an idea.
So here's my next idea. I love the tree up there, but it's a bit bland in the foreground. But check out this as a potential lead-in line here, but the tree sits too far over to the left. So this could be an opportunity to use layers to combine the tree from one shot with the lead-in line of the hedge in another shot. Down there for dancing, up there for thinking.
So, I'm back from the shoot. Now let's have a bit of fun inside Luminar Neo and see if we can't use it to combine those two layers and actually sculpt more of the vision of what I had in my mind, of what I wanted to see, and that nature let me down and we didn't get when we were on site. Let's do it and see if we can't salvage this very average looking photo of the tree here. And what I'm hoping to do is combine it with this element here. I'm going to use layers to do that. And once I've done that, I'm hoping we can replace the sky and go to work with some of Luminar Neo's fancy editing tools. So the first thing we want to do is process this as a raw file. So I'm not going to do anything too crazy with this. Let's start with a camera flat profile, and we're going to crank the smart contrast up pretty heavily on this one. You guys know I'm not a big fan of using the Luminar default profile. If we have access to a camera matching profile, we're much better off going for that because the colors are going to be a little bit more accurate. And I have put a video together that I'll link to in the description of how to actually install your own camera matching profiles into Luminar Neo. And I'm just going to come into curves and just have a little tweak here, drop the highlights down slightly and make sure we're not dropping our shadows too far. I'm jumping into the color. Currently color temperature is as shot. I'm just going to warm it up just a little bit. Something like that's fine. And I'm just going to push in a little bit more color vibrance and saturation just so that we have some nice strong colors to work with. I'll pop in a little bit of sharpness. Now I'm not going to worry about any of my lens optics, but what I may do is just bring the sharpening back down to avoid getting any haloing, because that's going to help when we introduce a new sky. Okay, something like that's fine for now. I'm just going to jump back to the catalog here. I'm going to copy these settings, so come to adjustment and copy adjustments. And now I'm going to click on this and highlight this image here, adjustments, and I'm going to paste those. So now we have our two photos processed in exactly the same way. The problem is if I want to bring one of these photos into the other as a layer, it's going to lose all of that processing, and I'll either have to copy the settings that we created in the develop raw section and remember all of these, and I'm going to have to match the curve and everything. I don't want to have to do that. So an easier way for me to do that and actually combine the two is to export the image I want to use as a layer as a TIFF file. So I'm actually going to work with this as my base layer because I like the lead in line position here. And then if I introduce the tree from this photo, I actually have the ability to shift the tree over to a more visually pleasing, just off center to the left position. So I'm going to jump back to this photo here, right click and come to export. And I'm going to have the format as TIFF because that is the highest quality that we're going to be able to work with and have these adjustments baked into the file. We're going to keep the color space as Adobe RGB, a lovely nice rich color space, and the bit depth we want to have that as 16, again to give us the most quality rather than 8. And I'm just going to make sure that's going into the same folder that I'm working in and hit export. And now if I jump back to the catalog, now that's exported, you'll see that we have two identical appearing photos. However, you can see this little icon in the top left here. That represents that we have edited this photo. So this is the raw photo and it's been edited to look like this. Now this is the TIFF file and it has no tools applied to it to create this edit. If I go to the edits tab, you can see it has no edits, and that is because we've just exported it with all of that editing baked into the file. And that's perfect. And now I'm going to combine this photo with the tree. So we're going to open this one up, come to edit, and I'm going to click the plus icon, and I'm going to choose the tree as the layer. So now it's available for me. It hasn't actually added it into the photo yet. I need to click on it. And now here we've got a tree dropped in with an opacity of 50%. So if I grab the opacity slider, I can push that to 100 so we see fully just the tree layer. And as I start to drop that down, we can see the layer underneath, which is the field with the hedge. So what I'm wanting to do is actually have our hedge lead our eye in to have the tree approximately here in the frame. So if I set that opacity back to about halfway, I can now click on this layer and move it around. You know that we've got this layer selected because it's got the blue outline around it, and it's also got the blue outline on its thumbnail here. So now I can just move this over and position it just about here. Something like that will be fine. And now I can crank the opacity all the way to 100%. And now all I need to do is just mask in only the bits of this layer that I want. So I'm going to open up my mask section, grab a brush, and put the strength down very low to start with, just so that I can get a sense of where the tree actually is. So I'm going to just paint faintly just a little bit of the tree there. Okay, let's push that up a bit higher. And there we go. We can start to see our tree that we're going to be bringing back in. I'm not too worried about the sky not matching perfectly. I just want to make sure that I have 100% of the tree, and that's why I pushed my strength of the brush up to 100, so I now know that wherever I'm painting over, I'm getting 100% of that layer showing up. And now I'm happy that I've got the main bulk of the tree and the horizon line nice and crisp. I can come in with a lower strength and just start to feather in some of the grass here. But what I want to make sure I'm not doing is having a kind of faded ghost appearance here. So I need to make a decision whether I either want to have the head showing here or whether I want to continue through with the fence line. So let's just push this to 100, paint over this bit here. I could go with the fence and go that way and just get rid of all of the hedge in that area. We could take that through. And that's basically the key. You just want to make sure that if you are going one way or the other, you don't have a kind of 50-50 blend area like we have going on just here. It's one or the other. So now I'm going to have to switch to my eraser so we can get rid of the fence passing in behind the hedge here. And we need to handle this little transition with a little bit more care. Just do that a little bit more refined. Okay, something like that's pretty good. So if we just look at our before and our after, here's our before, here's our after with the introduction of the tree. I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, we've got a bit of work to do with the sky, but that's so easy to do with Luminar Neo. So what's the next thing I want to do? Well, I want to bake all of these changes I've made into one file again. So I'm going to follow the same process that I made before of exporting this as a TIFF. Currently, this is blacked out here, so I'm just going to jump back to the catalog and come to the photo in the catalog view, right click, and this time I can export it. We'll add the word composite so we can identify this, and all we need to do is export it. And now we have an identical TIFF, but this time it's not two separate layers. If I jump to the edit section, you'll see this is just one single layer. And that's very important because now that means any change that we make to this photo occurs globally. It's going to affect both layers at the same time. It's really unfortunate that at the moment we don't just have a merge layers feature, but hopefully that will come in a future update of Luminar Neo. But for now, that's the workaround that we're going to use. So I just need to reset that. That's not what I want to be doing to this photo. The first thing I'd like to be doing is cropping this to a more appropriate crop. So I'm actually going to keep with a 2:3 ratio, I think, and I'm just going to bring this down and I'm just sliding this around. What I want to do is make sure I get rid of the fence post here. Yes, I could clone that out if I want, but why not just crop it out if we can? And now I'm just bringing this in so that we're keeping the photo with a nice balance. We've got about 1/3 of the frame, which is the field, 2/3 sky. The tree sits now nicely on the left-hand third. We've got the fence line leading our eye into the tree. I'm pretty happy with that, so I'll just click apply. And now we just need to swap out our sky. So I'm going to jump into the creative section, Sky AI, and select a sky. Now, yes, Luminar Neo comes with some really awesome skies. Very usable, very dramatic. However, I prefer to load in my own sky. And of all the sky collections that I've got, the Sky Master Collection is my favorite. I'll put a link to that. It's really good, 300 high quality skies. And if we go into the sunset, I'm just going to have a look through here, find something that's nice and subtle, but also matches the light direction. And just like that, we have a sunset dropped into our file. It's not a bad mask at the moment, but you can see that we need to do a bit of cleaning up to make sure this works well. So the first thing I want to do is sort out the horizon here, because we have this sort of transition zone here. And if I move the horizontal position up, you can see that we can actually bring that down so that it actually gets rid of that little transition zone. So it's there at the moment, the transition, bring it down, it's got rid of it. We could of course have gone for a sky that had the sun on the other side, and then we have the option to flip it, but this one worked out quite well. So the next thing we need to do is sort out the global gaps, and I find that pushing the global amount higher when you've got trees in your frame tends to work quite well. But the best way to actually see what's going on is to actually zoom in. Otherwise you're not going to get a true representation of how that mask is being affected. But if you look at the fence line here, where you've got like the barbed wire and stuff, that is doing such a good job of introducing that sky seamlessly into this image. But there are areas that we need to sort out, and the one that I'm most concerned about is this right here. I really don't know what's going on there. So let's just have a play around with the sliders and just see if we can't fix that up. Okay, setting the global gaps around 20 seems to have done a pretty good job of bringing the bird back. I think we've got a little bit of an anomaly going on here, but I'm not too worried about that. Just to the right hand side and left hand side of the tree, because I can always use the clone tool just to clean that up a little bit if I want to. But that's okay. Now let's open the scene relighting. This is one of my favourite things to do, is just grab that relight strength and just have a play around, because the idea is it's going to introduce the tonality and also the colour saturation from the sky back into the foreground. But in this case, I've seen it work much better than this. I'm not really too happy with that. So instead, I'm going to approach this in a different way. But before I do, I just want to make sure that I'm happy with these other sliders. The atmospheric haze is quite a nice one to play with, sometimes to just brighten or lighten your skies. You obviously have the brightness slider there as well, but atmospheric haze is also a nice little way to do that. I'm quite happy with the colour of the sky at the moment, so I don't need to warm it up or cool it down. I'm just going to leave that as it is, and we'll just close that down and move on from there. So the thing that I'd actually like to fix is the green coloration of the grass here. I just feel like it'd be better if we can harmonise our palette a little bit. We've got these nice orange, yellows, pinks going on in the sky, and then a green kind of clash going on with the grass here. So I'm going to do that through the colour tool, jump into HSL, and we can have a look at controlling the individual colours this way. So if I grab the green hue, for instance, I can push that more into a yellow colour, and that's quite nice. We can do the same with the yellows as well and kind of start pushing those into a more orangey colour. And we've also got some cool tones going on in the cyans, a little bit in those shadows, so I'm just going to bring that down as well. Now, I'm not sure if it'll be successful, but I'm going to see if I can brighten up the area through the luminance section where the light is just kissing across the ground here. So that's the yellows. Let's grab it. Yep, grabbing that slider, and you can see that we can change the brightness value of that. So that's actually really nice. Just being able to lift that up gives us a little bit more interest in the foreground here, because there really wasn't too much going on when I actually took this photo. So any added interest we can kind of force into this image as we're crafting it, I think will be to our benefit. Let's have a little play with the vibrant slider as well. Enjoying adding a bit more colour to this one. Let's go with that. Okay, I'll just hold the / key so we can see where we came from. And this is where we've got to. So here's our before and here's our after. Okay, pretty good. How about we add some structure and just see what that does for us. So I'm just going to grab the amount slider, crank that up, and have a look at my image overall and see what I like, what I don't like. And already I'm really not liking this little discrepancy around the tree here. I probably should have spent a little bit more time just cleaning that up, but a quick way to deal with that is to jump into the professional section where we can find the clone tool, and I'm just going to clone in some of the surrounding sky, maybe not with 100%, just sort of feather it in around 50%, and I'm just going to click and start painting. And sometimes there's a bit of a dance back and forth, just kind of feathering this in. Okay, it's a little softer transition. And now I'm going to resample a point from over here. Down here looks about the right sort of brightness for this area. Maybe just a little bit too bright, so let's come in from this area here. So I'm alt clicking on my screen where I want to sample from, and then just clicking and painting. And because I'm at 50% strength, it's just building up slowly. And I might even borrow some from this side just to kind of ease in over this area here. Okay, that's pretty good. It's better than where we were. Let's have a little toggle of the before and after with that tool. So here's our before and here's our after. Just a little more of a subtle transition around the edge of that tree, before and after. Okay, let's come in here and go back to our structure AI tool that I was quite liking in some places. I certainly like how it's adding interest around the tree in the foreground here as well. So now all I need to do is just mask this off because it's a little bit too excessive in the sky. I'm still liking this nice soft feathery look in the sky, so that's too much with the structure AI. But we can paint it in where we want it. I'm not sure where my masking has gone, but I'm sure it will show up if I jump to the edit section. Yep, sure enough, you have your adjustments that we just set and then the masking as well. We also still have the original instance of structure AI that I opened up. Even though I didn't make any changes, that appears in our edit section. I don't need to worry about that. Let's just delete that, throw it in the bin, and jump back to the top version of the tool. I'm going to grab my mask and I'm just going to start painting that effect in, as I say, only where I want it. So I'll grab the brush tool, use my bracket keys to make my brush a bit bigger, and now I'm painting over my tree. Currently I'm at 100% of this effect, which is far too much. I don't want that much, but you know what? I'm at 100% at the moment. I might as well just paint it in where I want it. And now I can go the other way with my erase tool, put that at 50%, and then just start taking this effect back away. So it's a little bit too much right here in the foreground, so we'll just ease that off. Make sure it's not affecting around the edge of the tree too much, and also just ease it off here. It is making that foreground look a little crispy, so we'll just take it away a little bit. Let's have a look. Here's our before, here's our after. Much more subtle, but it's still introducing that nice pop into the photo. I like that. Let's close that down and see what else we can apply. Okay, what I think I'd like to try is introducing what I call a light sandwich. Sounds weird, but bear with me. It's basically this idea of having a brighter part through the center of your frame, sandwiched by a darker part at the top and a darker part at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is jump into the develop section. I could do this several ways. I could grab the exposure slider, bring that down, and then just mask that in. In fact, let's do that. That's the easiest way to do it. So I'm just going to work with linear gradients this time. So that allows me to click and drag down. And so I have 100% of the effect we created, which was a darkened exposure at the top, 50% in the middle, and then tapered off to the bottom line where it's going to be at 0. So we can just sort of feather that through. Currently we don't see anything, so we're in the mask mode. Let's flip back to adjustments and we can see that we've made the sky darker. So before and after, and now we can also mask in from the bottom up again with a linear gradient. So what I can do is click here and just bring it up. So we're basically going to use the shadow that already exists across the grass there. We're not going to bring it up halfway to where the sun is across here. It's not going to look right. So we're just going to bring it up over the shadow area here. And again, let's have a little look what we've done. So here's our before, here's our after. That is what I call a light sandwich. And now we've set it up, we can come in and we can tweak the exposure amount. You know, we don't have to be as heavy handed as this, you know, we can ease it in just to a point where we feel happy with it. But let's go somewhere around there, before and after. And one of my big issues with taking this photo in the first place was that there was just no drama in the scene whatsoever. And so I'm hoping that I can craft some drama using Luminar Neo. So let's try the dramatic tool and see what that can do for us. So I'm just going to grab the amount slider and start pushing that up. Now, if you guys have used this tool before, you know that it starts to accentuate contrast, but adding whites to the highlights, blacks to the shadows. And sometimes that can be just a little bit too much, you know, it starts to wash out your colors. But you know, working with it in a more refined way by dropping down that local contrast amount, that's going to smooth that effect out a little bit. So if we grab that slider, you can see we get really crunchy effect with local contrast pushed to 100. Ease it all the way back, just softens it off, and I prefer it down in these lower numbers around here. So before and after. We also have access to the brightness and the saturation. So maybe we don't want to desaturate our photo. And for this one, I don't. I'm enjoying the color in it. So let's just have a little play here. I think I'll leave the brightness at 30. But now we've set the tool up the way we want it. Now we can come in just as before and play with the amount. You know, how much of this effect do we actually want in the photo? And I don't know, maybe around half. Sometimes you just have to stare at your photo, grab that slider and keep moving it back left and right and just kind of eyeballing the photo and getting a feel for what you like. Normally I kind of push things too far, especially when I'm doing these videos, because I don't spend as long assessing whether I like it or not. But if we go for the before and after, I think we're in a pretty good place with that. We'll go with that. Okay, to continue our theme of added drama, let's look at the contrast. And a really good tool for doing that is the super contrast tool, because as you know, we can work with the highlight contrast, we can work with the mid-tone contrast, and we can work with the shadow contrast as well. And the slider underneath the sort of amount slider lets you set whether you want to brighten or darken that particular highlight, mid-tone or shadow. I'll just double click these to reset them, and I can work on them one at a time. So first of all, let's look at our highlights. If I push that up, we're bleaching out this area here. I don't really want to do that. We're bleaching it out because I'm pushing the balance slider to the left. If I push it to the right, it's going to darken those areas down. Overall, I just think a slight introduction of highlight contrast control would be a good idea. Now let's grab the midtones and have a look at what that's doing. It's certainly adding a lot of saturation as I boost that up, which I quite like in this case. Here's our before, here's our after. Pretty subtle at the moment. What about the shadows? Currently, the shadow balance is brightening up all those shadows. That's not what I want. I want to go the other way. So I'm just going to push the shadow balance up, darken the shadows down to a point where I think it looks pretty good. And now I can just ease the amount of that effect back. Somewhere around there. Let's have a look at our before and our after. A bit more punch and contrast in the image before and after. Okay, let's keep working with the color. Currently I feel like the blues have got away on us a little bit up here, getting a little oversaturated, but that's fine because I can just come back in to the HSL section, come into saturation, grab the blue slider and just start playing with that. Just bring it back down into a point where I feel it looks a little more believable. So here was our before, very oversaturated. Here's our after. Now while we're on the issue of colour, there's actually a couple of areas that are still bugging me. There's a little bit of blue going on behind the tree and like a bit of a band here. And also in the shadows just over here, there's still a bit of green and cyan that's just given a bit of a weird cast. Now when you're doing edits like this, whether or not you change things like that, that is honestly entirely up to you, because, you know, it's me being a little bit pedantic perhaps, but I just really want to sort that out. So maybe the cyans need to be dropped down, maybe the greens, you know, I'm desaturating them just through here at the moment. Maybe we need to work on the hue as well, but maybe you don't even need to worry about it at all. But for me, it's just those little differences in your edit that can really elevate it to the next level. So all I'm doing here is grabbing the blue slider and hoping I can desaturate that area. Currently, I'm not worried about what the rest of the photo looks like, because I'm going to mask this effect once I'm happy with it only where I want it. So another thing we could do is actually just grab the blue slider and see whether just changing the hue of that at all actually helps to decrease that. It's not being quite as effective as I want, but you know what, I'm not too worried. Again, my mask for some reason is only accessible in the edit section at the moment rather than on the tool when I first open it, but that's fine. I can come in, grab the brush, paintbrush, put the strength to about 50% so I can build it up, and again, small brush for this because I just want to paint over the areas I want to affect. So you can see all that sort of green toning through there in that shadow, and I just want to neutralize it. Something like that's good for that area. So toggle the before, nasty green hues, and after we've got rid of that. Okay, so using that same principle, I'm just going to paint that effect over the shadow here to get rid of the kind of greens and cyans that were showing up in the grass in the shadow, and just try and take some of those out. And now just do one pass through this area where we were picking up a bit of blue in the sky. Didn't quite look right. Okay, let's toggle the before and after. It's really subtle, you have to pay attention, but it is an improvement. Okay, let's carry on and move back into the more creative realm what I would like to do is just enhance the highlights with a bit more kind of yellow and warmth, and the toning tool is a great place to do that. So I'm just going to push the saturation up, and as you can see, as soon as I do that, ooh, we got a load of red and pink in the sky. That's not what we want, but by pushing the saturation up, that allows us now to see much better the color that we're introducing, and something around this yellowy orange kind of color here, that looks pretty good. Now the amount slider lets us weight this tool one way into the shadows or more towards the highlights. So we're going to get more of that yellow in the highlights if we set the amount at 100, or hardly any if we have it at 0. So I'm just going to play around with this until I'm kind of happy. Yeah, kind of midway is absolutely fine for this. So here's our before and here's our after. Before and after. Yeah, I like that. Okay, what's next? You guys know I love putting the mystical thing on just about everything I do, but I'm going to resist the temptation in this case, and I'm going to open up the glow section. A similar kind of look, but I do prefer mystical, but let's have a little play around with this. Okay, soft focus. Again, 100% so I can see what these effects are doing clearly. So the glow filter, that's quite nice. The Orton effect, actually that's so strong at 100% I can't actually get a feel for what it's doing. That's way too much, but you know, just a little tickle of the Orton effect, that might be all we're after. And what about the Orton effect soft? I'm a fan of softening up our landscape photos, so let's have a little play here. You know, 18% before and after. Yeah, I quite like that. Drop it down a little more, before and after. Nice. And the final thing that I would like to do is apply a lookup table or a LUT. And the great thing about lookup tables is it just helps to create a more harmonized palette. So you can see as soon as I clicked on Anaheim there, we got a more unified color palette going on, and that might be a good option to go with. Let's try something else. Let's go for Bakersfield. That's a kind of more pinky look. Long Beach enhances the colors. You know, you can just play with these as a final step, and I would recommend do it as a final step because, as I say, this is for unification, like just unifying that color palette. So, you know, maybe we put a bit of Anaheim in there. Play with the contrast if we want, and we don't just have to stick with one application of that tool. We can come in, open up a brand new instance of it, and now we can put another lookup table on top of that last one that we did. So let's say we want to have a bit of Bakersfield as well as the Anaheim look. Push it to 100 and we can clearly see what colors are being injected into our photo, and then we can just bring that down to a point where, you know, we're happy with. Again, about 16%, that's pretty cool. Grab the contrast, have a little play with that. Yeah, let's put a bit more contrast in. Why not? Before and after. And I feel like the highlights actually are getting a little overexposed with all the addition of these tools. So if we jump back to what our original photo was like and where we've got to with this process, you know, huge difference. But you can tell that we are pushing these highlights to their absolute extreme. I feel like we're getting a little bit overexposed and oversaturated on the little hedge line here as well. So what I think I will do is just finish this photo off with a little touch of curves, and obviously we find the curves inside our develop tool. So this allows us, as you know, to control the brightness levels through our whole photo. So we can brighten up the midtones, we can darken things down, and you can get a really nice contrasty look oftentimes just by grabbing that midpoint and bringing it down. Look at that lovely addition of contrast and saturation just with that one change. So before and after. So that's a really nice tool to have in your bag. To keep the final process a little more subtle, I'm not going to have a pure black point. I'm going to grab that point and bring it up. As you can see, as I bring this up, it lightens any black pixels to more of a grey. So depending how far you push that up, the more grey it's going to get. So I find that normally just a little lift off the bottom, and it's just a nice subtle change to your photo. I'm going to call that done, and let's have a quick look by pressing the / key. This was our composite that we created with the tree and the lead-in line of the hedge, so 2 photos in one, and this is where we've taken it to with our editing inside Luminar Neo. I have had a lot of fun playing around with this and crafting an image that just wasn't able to be captured when I was there on site. Thank you very much, Luminar Neo. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you like the look of Luminar Neo and you don't have it yet, there is a link for it in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks very much. Bye bye for now.